Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome to the 2021 My Broadband Cloud Conference, Africa Data Centers. And it's a great pleasure to welcome the CEO, Stephane Duproz. Stephane, it's really good to see you. Bonjour, should I be saying? Comment ça va?
Ça va très bien, Aki. Merci. Thank you very much. And, really appreciate being with you, in particular, if we continue speaking in French. And congratulations on your beautiful accent.
My French is very limited, and the last time we spoke, you are joining us from Paris at the moment. I mean, you were in the thick of things with COVID. Have things settled down quite a bit? I'm seeing pictures of Europe, and Europe is slowly returning back to normal.
Very slowly, and I think we all should remain extremely cautious, as it's very clear that there have been waves of these pandemics, and it's nobody can tell what the future is going to be. So as vaccination is progressing, things are getting much better, but we all have to remain very cautious to limit the progression of this.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, I mean, it's 18 months into the lockdown here in South Africa, and just globally, we're in 18 months into this pandemic. It's extraordinary to think that, 18 months ago, there was the start of this situation that we're in right now. And it's the cloud, it's the data centers that have been the glue that has held this business continuity together. It is this that is enabling you and I to have this conversation, for people to interact, for business to continue. And we cannot even understate how important the data centers and the cloud has been in really this business continuation. I'd hate to think if this pandemic had hit us, a decade ago, what the situation would have been like. But help us to understand. We talk about data centers and the impact that they have. Building a data center impacts an entire region. I mean, we've seen this in South Africa with, two big data centers, several big data centers that have just been built over the last 3 years. And in this region, it's really quite critical. It seems to be far more than just a simple room that's filled with servers. So how do you explain a data center and building a data center, Stephane?
Before explaining how to build it, let's explain what it is.
Yes.
And we are using permanently every day at work, personally, the internet and digital tools, even WhatsApp. When you use WhatsApp, you're creating content. You upload content and you download. I mean, your recipient, the recipient of your message, is downloading that content. And the whole of the internet is working like that. When you send an email, you are sending content. And then, the recipient of your email is downloading it from somewhere. And the whole of the digital world is based on exchange of content. What we are doing now in this, video conferencing, there is content that's being exchanged. And all of that content is physical. And it has to be physically somewhere. It flows a lot, of course. The content that we are creating now in that video flows. But that flow is going from one place to another place, reaching its recipient at some point. And all of that is actually physical and needs an infrastructure. And that infrastructure is twofold. There is the connectivity infrastructure, the fiber, if you wish, allowing the flow to continue. But then there is the infrastructure for the content itself, where it sits, and it sits on servers. And those servers need to be located in a place that is built for purpose for them. Typically, they use a lot of power, and there needs to be a redundancy of power in case one of the power feed isn't working well. It needs to be cooled down, as servers, just as your laptop or your desktop, are generating heat, and that needs to be reduced, and a few other things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's extraordinary when you just think about it. Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, it's just that we take it for granted, right? That this is actually, as you described, happening in real time. You're on another continent in Paris right now, and this is all happening in real time. It blows my mind when you think of what the internet was like 20 years ago.
Yeah. And you know, as we are using it and it's getting so close to our normal life and our real life, we sometimes forget that there are factories behind that, plants, to make it happen. And all of that content and all of the equipment that is necessary to store and flow that content are in data centers. Data centers are the home of the internet, because everything, and not only the equipment needed to make the connectivity part of the internet work, but more, I would say, more in an even larger scale, the servers, the physical tools to actually have the data come and go and be stored properly is in data centers. So, you know, the data centers are really, if you look at the internet in a way that is, you know, the internet are flows of cars, if you wish, you know, there are roads,
Yes.
and that is the fiber, then, you know, the data centers are the towns.
Okay. No, it's a good analogy to use, and I guess it's the heart of the entire operation. Without a data center, what we're doing is, you know, it's just we wouldn't be able to do it. It's as simple as that, you know. So you just have a brand new respect for this room that people think is filled with all sorts of servers, which it is, but it's doing a lot more than just, you know, storing information. I mean, this is really making this particular call happen, and amongst other things that you mentioned. So when you look at it economically speaking, there surely is a ripple effect. When you look at the impact that a data center has in a specific region, it's really clearly the economic impact is immense. I mean, what about local businesses, for example? When you look at small and medium-sized businesses, I mean, that economic impact must be profound.
It is huge. It is huge, you know, and simply coming back to your previous questions about building. You know, when we are just opening now a very big new data center in Johannesburg on our Midrand campus, and you know, it's been a year of work, construction work, and you know, at some point there were something like 800 workers on site.
Wow.
And at a moment where, you know, the construction industry in South Africa wasn't at its best. So, you know, the economic impact was absolutely huge on, you know, the general contractor, but all of the subcontractors and everything, and the workers themselves. But going beyond construction, that digital world, which the data center is the home of, so the presence of the data center allows for that creation of that digital hub, is immense. The capacity that it's bringing, the benefit that is bringing, you know, has been surveyed, and typically, you know, McKinsey has predicted by 2025, the productivity benefit that Africa could get out of that could go over $300 billion.
Wow.
So, and only on actually 6 verticals, you know, being education, agriculture, health, government activities. You know, typically, all of that digital capacity can help agricultural production increase by 20%.
That's impressive. I mean, you actually don't even think about the agriculture. You know, we all take it for granted. We're living in a city, and you know, we're having this kind of conversation. But the impact on every single business is really quite profound. And you talk about your data center in Midrand. I've been driving past it for over a year and watching it go up. You know, people think, oh, you just put in a few servers, and in a month you've got this up and running. It's actually a very, very complex thing to build a data center, you know, and it requires a lot of money and a lot of planning. You know, it's not something you just, you know, can put up in a space of 3 months, you know. You mentioned mentioned those hyperscalers. I mean, sometimes people don't quite understand what is a hyperscaler, and cloud providers talk about these hyperscalers. The AWSs, the Microsofts of this world with Azure and Google, etc. It's a bit of a simplistic question, but what is exactly the relationship between your data centers and these specific guys?
So, the hyperscalers, let's start by that. It is companies who are using for their activity a large scale of that infrastructure we were referring to earlier. Servers, because and actually in a hyper large manner. So the scale of what they're doing in terms of using servers to create digital activity is very, 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 very big. So those hyperscalers, you've mentioned a few names which actually are our customers, use our data centers. They do need for their activity to deploy their servers at a very large scale somewhere, and that is in a data center.
Okay.
They need data center of very high quality to work, and that very high quality aspect of it is probably one of the reasons why they have been waiting that long to actually come to Africa, because they were not 100% sure that there were data center providers of the level of quality that they require to provide the service. And that's the reason why we are at Africa Data Center so proud of having them as customers, because it shows that the international standards of the highest level we can do that in Africa. And that is highly participating to the development of this. So those hyperscalers provide, cloud services, capacity to use digital tools without having to invest heavily. That is the principle of the cloud. And obviously, everywhere in the world, but also in Africa, having the possibility to, without having to invest massively, to have digital capacity is fantastic. I mean, I'm always extremely impressed by the dynamism and the creativity of Africa. It's just that for the moment, it's not been able to express itself because of the lack of sufficient digital tools, because of the lack of sufficient infrastructure, because of the lack of high quality data centers. So that arrival of the digital world in Africa is completely changing the scope. All the benefits that I was referring to that McKinsey is predicting, but it also goes to government. All of that capacity McKinsey predicts government will reduce they will make savings of up to 75% in their activity, because they could go digital rather than the way it's being done for the moment. And also it helps, and we are seeing a very large number of African, including South African, large enterprise, just really embarking in their digital transformation journey using the cloud, and by that making savings that they can consequently use that capacity in developing new services. And also the cloud, because you give that capacity at a small cost, generates a new activity in existing businesses and new businesses which wouldn't have existed without it.
It's crazy when you think about it. This call, as we mentioned earlier, you're in Paris, I'm in Johannesburg, We're doing this for a conference. This is really happening, and you just spoke now about a hyperscaler. This is happening on a Microsoft Azure server, probably sitting at one of your data centers. And this call at the moment is done via Teams. And when I end this call, I'm going to, the actual video content is sitting up on the cloud. I'm going to download it, have a look at it, and then upload it to the My Broadband team, who then edit the content and put it up on another data center, probably, where people are going to consume this at this year's My Broadband Cloud Conference. I mean, when you just think about the journey, the agility that it adds, the ease of doing business, it's quite mind-blowing, Stephane. Now, I read somewhere that data centers, and this is one of the contentious issues, I guess, that you mentioned it yourself, to power these data centers, it uses a lot of energy. And I read somewhere that it consumes something like 3% of all the power that's generated globally. How accurate is this? And how much energy do data centers use? I mean, if that is correct, 3% of the global energy consumption, it's quite crazy. And given the disruptions to the grid that we're experiencing, that must surely give you sleepless nights. Can you provide some context and perspective on the energy usage of a data center?
Actually, it's not what consumes power. It's not the data center. It's the servers that are in the data center.
Okay.
So what consumes power is the digital life. Data centers, by neutralizing equipment, hugely reduce the power consumption of the digital world. If there were no large data centers and everybody was having its small data centers, the power consumption would probably be 3 times more. It is being considered that a kilowatt hour consumed in a data center, it is 3 kilowatt hours that are not consumed elsewhere.
Okay.
Let's go step by step. It is the servers, where the digital world exists, that consume the power in the data center. So imagine there were no digital world. If I had to sign a contract, if we were in Johannesburg and we had to sign a contract with somebody in Cape Town, what were we doing before the digital world happened? We had to fly.
You had to go fly to Cape Town, and that itself is adding to the carbon footprint.
Sign the contract on a piece of paper, and then fly back and redo and then fly again. Whereas the digital world makes it that you just modify it on your whatever, say Microsoft Word, but it could be something else, and then you don't fly at all. So the digital world by itself reduces the carbon footprint of life, of the economy.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a lot cleaner, isn't it? I mean, I like the way you put it. It's a lot cleaner. That footprint, that carbon footprint, is greatly reduced when you look at the whole picture of what you're describing.
Yeah, and then once that is understood, the second step is how can we reduce the power consumption of the digital world, and that's where data centers come. Because every day we are thinking about how we can improve that. And again, by concentrating that power consumption and all of those equipment which consume power, we have the capacity to use better equipment, more professional, which participates into reducing the consumption of power. There is equipment that we mutualize with all our customers, rather than typically each of our customers needing to have a generator to back up their servers. When they come to us to serve the 300 customers we have, we probably have 10 generators. So 10 generators that we test every month rather than 300, just as an explanation of that. Third step, now that it is understood that actually data centers are tools of massive reduction of the digital world carbon footprint, how can we improve our efficiency and go towards a carbon neutral. And that is a key pillar of Africa data centers, where we are working on a plan to become completely carbon neutral, by the end of the decade.
Wow.
And that goes by using as much renewable energy as we can on site. Each of our data centers has as much solar panel as it's possible. I mean, if you look at the box that a data center can be, there are solar panel all over the roof and even all over the parking slots and everywhere we can. We are trying to source renewable power from the power we are buying. So that is something that we do quite a lot. And in every of our new projects, and we are now at Africa Data Center we are going to launch the largest data center expansion plan ever on the continent in 10 countries. And at the very beginning of the design of the projects, that particular aspects of power efficiency and carbon neutrality is at the heart of the project.
Very exciting. I want to talk to you about that project. When you look at Africa data centers, you talk about both interconnected data centers and carrier neutral data centers. Well, the concepts are pretty self-explanatory. Can you tell us more about this and why this matters?
So, telecom companies, sometimes have data centers, if only for their own equipment, network equipment. So, if you are a customer of Telco A, I'm going to give any names, of course, Telco X, and you put your content, your data in the data center of that Telco X, your content is on Telco X network, right? So everybody that is on that network have very easy access to that content because it's on the same network.
Right.
But now, if you, as a customer, so you have put your content, your video, on that server that is on the data center of Telco X. I happen to be a customer of Telco Y. How do I get to your content? How can I see your video? I have to rely on how Telco X and Telco Y decide to interconnect with each other.
Uh-huh.
And that's out of my control and of your control. And that is the reason why, everywhere in the world, the telco data centers have not become part of the overall data center success stories. On the other hand, you have carrier neutral data centers. And those carrier neutral data centers basically say that any telecom provider can be in the data center and provide services, meaning your content in a carrier neutral data center can immediately be distributed over all of the networks that are there, which is a very key component, because if you that gives much better performance and channels of distribution, basically, of your content. So if you look at the cloud providers, they are basically content providers. The content is your data. And they fight against each other, like we all do, to provide a better customer experience. So if some of their customers' networks cannot directly access the content, then it's not an optimal customer experience. So by nature, they will go in a place that is a crossroads of networks, so that their content can be easily distributed across all of those various networks for a better customer experience. And once that is created, then it creates an ecosystem where the enterprise, want to be very close to that crossroads as well, where the cloud platforms are, because it's then the flow of data is going to be even faster, which is going to make further gains of productivity, and then it starts to be more content, which is going to generate more connectivity, more roads going to the crossroads, which is going to attract more content, and it's that snowball effect that creates the digital world that we all experience.
Well, it makes complete sense. I mean, you're adding real efficiency in the world that we're living in with these data centers. I mean, Stephane, I share your passion and I share your excitement for the continent. And the last time we spoke, you were really enthusiastic about where we're going. And when you look at us today, I remember being at that first undersea cable landing point, well, the really big one, the wax undersea cable that landed in Africa. I remember being at the one that was on the on the other coast of South Africa, on the Durban side. And since then, there are so many undersea cables. So we've got plenty of capacity coming into the continent, and of course feeding into all the countries along their coastlines. But we are a little bit behind when it comes to data centers globally. Now, you mentioned earlier about the 10 countries and the expansion plans that Africa data centers have. Where do you see the continent in the next decade? Because ultimately, these data centers are going to have a tremendous impact to the continent. And economically, this is where it's going to be happening. I think last time you mentioned to me is that right now, as it looks over the next decade, the amount of money that's been spent on data centers on the African continent is something that we've never seen before globally. So tell us about your plans. Tell us about Africa data centers. Where are you going in the next decade? How many data centers? How connected is this continent going to be in the next 10 years?
Africa is an outstanding opportunity of growth for everyone. And that includes, of course, the digital world. And it probably is actually mainly, firstly, going to be the digital world. And that is something that I have been expecting really all my life. Because, I'm African and I wanted to come back to Africa, sharing my data center experience. And it's just that, switching time that we're experiencing now, where the whole world is now seeing Africa as a new opportunity. It's a new market as well, no? On one hand, and then on the other hand, you have Africa with all its dynamism, all its creativity, ready to take its due role and share in the global economy and in the global life, and that moment where those two strengths merge and is happening now, and all of that needs data centers. So we are already the largest Pan-African data center operators with presence in today's 6 cities, and we are going to expand not in 10 new countries, but in 10 countries, including our existing, but including new ones, where we are going to be extremely strong, obviously, in South Africa, the southern part of Africa. We are going to strengthen our undisputed leadership in East Africa, and we are arriving very, very, very strongly in West Africa, and we will not forget North Africa either.
Yes.
So we are simply following the flow. One important benefit we're having is that that plan is funded. We have secured the funding of in excess of $500 million for it.
Wow.
So all of that is going to happen in the coming 2 years.
That's amazing. How many data centers do you think potentially could be rolled out in the next decade? how many are we looking at on the continent? Yourselves, Africa Data Centers, and everybody else. Is it one of those continents that we're going to see a massive explosion in data centers?
Yes, very clearly. The number of data centers is not really relevant, Sariaki, because you can build thousands of very small ones. But Xalam Analytics just said that what is needed to accompany, to accommodate for what Africa is going to see in the visible future in terms of power capacity is 1,000 megawatts of data center capacity.
Wow.
We currently probably see that probably below 200.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Stephane, I always love talking to you because your enthusiasm just rubs off. And I just love your passion, and I'm just so excited to see this growth. And I have no doubt that we are going to have many, many more conversations in the next few years. And we're going to look back to this conversation and say, remember when we said this was going to happen and this is going to happen now? And it's really, one cannot really truly predict that demand, because as more people move to smartphones, as more people create a lot of content on the continent, it's just going to be that exponential growth in data centers that has to cater for people, because we need to create this. Otherwise, that economic growth is simply not going to happen. So really exciting to see the investments that Africa Data Centers are making. And Stephane Duproz, the CEO of African Data Centers, thank you for your time, sir. And thank you for joining us at this year's My Broadband Cloud Conference.
Thank you very much, Aki. Been a pleasure being with you.
Thank you, sir.